We're beginning a series of diagnosing NC State's impact players and our expectations for them in 2025. Today, we'll start with one of the most prominent pass catchers.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our Friday show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can sign up today and get $150 back in bonus bets if you sign up, place a $5 bet, and it wins. Head on over to FanDuel.com today in order to get started. Happy Friday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. We're back in the saddle here on Friday. I hope you didn't forget about us. Just a slight delay, back on schedule. We're also planning to release podcast episodes both Saturday and Sunday. Playing a little bit of catch up, but we'll get back on schedule here very quickly. Today, and this is something I've had on my agenda here for a couple weeks, I think it's the perfect lead-in to kicking this thing off here, and now just less than 3 weeks' time. We're under 3 weeks to go until we start the NC State and the college football 2025 season. Cannot wait for that. But what we're going to do, we're not going to touch on all of our players, obviously. We don't have time for all of our players. Our impact players, our biggest, most important players for the season. We're going to talk about our expectations for them entering this year, what we project they might do in terms of statistics, maybe some over-unders, our thoughts on there, or maybe why we think we see additional struggles on the horizon. We'll get into that as well. Today, Noah Rogers, one of the most highly rated wide receivers to come out of not just the state of North Carolina, but specifically in Raleigh in quite some time. Ventured up to Ohio State, came back to NC State last year. We all had very big expectations of him, but I think how easy it is to forget at times that he was just a freshman. That was his first taste of college football, and at times it kind of looked like that. However, we also had some offensive struggles, quarterback change. You all saw what happened there. But Noah Rogers coming into the 2025 season, Kenton, where do you expect to see significant growth out of him?
I think it's just the consistency. I think that we are going to see a player that I don't think that any player is truly defined by your highest moments, but I think players are like teams. There's the old saying of you're going to have one game where you play your best game. Everybody plays out of their mind for that one game. And then you have one game where you play your worst game. And everybody, for whatever reason, has a bad case of can't get right-itis, but the greatest teams can get over that hump and win that game as well. But, you know, it's a situation where who your team actually is the 10 games in between. And that's kind of what the thought is for Noah Rogers here. What is the next step for him? Is being consistent. We have playmakers all over the place on this offense. We have them. They're there. What we don't have is a consistency in getting them the ball in winning positions. And Noah Rogers is a guy that we saw last year. A winning position for him is a cornerback draped over one shoulder, safety coming over out of the middle of the field, on the other shoulder. That's a winning position. Think about that for a second in terms of what that actually means for him as a player, right? If that is a winning position, everything below it must be a winning position. And if you say, well, that was just his one game where he played out of his mind, that's fine. But if you say, all right, great, all of the games other than that are areas where he is generally who he's going to be, that's fine too. The reality is, even in those games, he showed the flashes. There were many times where the ball was in his hands on basic slants or drag routes, and you're like, oh, this kid's got some juice. He's got some go to him after the ball is in his hands. And that's not even talking about his ability to high point the ball, which I think is one of his best aspects. So you look at Noah Rogers, and you look at a player who was so highly coveted for a reason. You look at a player in him, and you say, hey, he was one of those guys that everybody talked about as that's a must-have for NC State for a reason. And I believe that he'll kind of, I wouldn't even say right the ship because he had a good freshman year. I think he continues on the path, grows from last year, and really starts to take off in year two.
The general consensus around Noah Rogers is he can simply do things that many other wide receivers cannot do, both physically, reading routes, just the IQ of a top-tier wide receiver he has at already such a young age. And I think if you're going to see Noah Rogers really break out in an NC State uniform, this is the year that you're going to see it. He got his feet wet last year. You saw some highs. To Quentin's point, I wouldn't necessarily call any lows. I mean, he had a couple drops here and there, but nothing like spectacularly bad. But this year, the consistency is going to be the main key all year for Noah Rogers. The offseason camaraderie, I'm sure that he built with CJ and the rest of the offense, because keep in mind, we retained the majority of this offense. You retain Holly Smothers, Justin Jolie, I think, 60% of your offensive line, and of course, Roper, who was with the team last year. Keeping the band together in that sense, it's not just good for CJ, it's good for your skill players as well. And I think a guy like Noah Rogers is really going to benefit from something like that this year. Now, let's talk about, I guess not in a negative light, but if Noah Rogers is to not take any steps forward this year, why do you think that may be?
Well, I think it'll be a situation where health is always a factor in terms of, football is one of the last gladiator sports. Health can always be a determining factor in whether or not you get the stats that you're looking for, you have the performances that you're looking for. And the other thing, it's like, never mind. When a quarterback has good chemistry with his wide receivers, and at the end of the day, I don't think that chemistry will be the problem, but I do think the only other way I could see him not hitting that is if somebody else goes nuclear, like somebody else does something, because I could see a world where he has a spectacular year and Jolie wins the Mackey. However, I'm not as sure if I see a world where he has a spectacular year, Jolie wins the Mackey, Hollywood Smothers is a finalist for the Dope, and Wesley Grimes is a guy that puts up 800 to 1,000 yards. All of a sudden, there's only one ball to go around. And this is not to diminish either one of these players. I'm not in the camp of one of these guys has to be successful for NC State to be good, or it can't be Keenan Jackson, or it can't be Terrell Anderson. I'm fine with whoever getting it. But if we're specifically talking about Noah Rogers and his performance, if these other guys come along in a meaningful way, take such a meaningful jump to where it's like, hey, listen, Wesley Grimes is always open. Keenan Jackson is always open. Jonathan Paylor is by far the best gadget guy in America. He can do it all at an extremely high level. And Hollywood Smothers is a 1,500 yard from scrimmage guy. What then happens to the rest of the yards? It kind of ends up being the situation where you end up getting left behind, not because you didn't do enough or you weren't good enough, but because the others were so great. The others put on performances where you're like, hey, he's going to be a first rounder now because of this year. So I think that those are the potential ways. I'd either say health or multiple breakout seasons where multiple guys, again, they're not having good seasons. They're going nuclear, record-setting type seasons.
I have essentially the same answer, just maybe in a little bit of a different font. I think maybe you could see a situation where there's only so many mouths you can feed. Like if Justin Jolie is going off, maybe you look into feeding him more than anyone else on the field. Just that situation, perhaps you see Noah Rogers not get the burn that maybe we think that he can handle, or I don't know, maybe the play calling just doesn't quite work out in his favor either.
Don't you wish that evil on me, Ricky Bobby? Don't you wish that evil play calling juju on us anymore, Ricky Bobby?
We've had certainly too much of that in the past, but now we're looking at hashtag R2A, rope to you-know-what. Hurt Roper is on the sticks now. But no, with Noah Rogers, those are my only concerns because nothing else is on my radar. The physical concerns, I have none outside of Kenton's point, just staying healthy. He has the physical capabilities that very few wide receivers have. He has the speed. He has the hands. He has the ability to high point a ball and adjust his body in midair to make an athletic grab that not many people can. And of course, that catch against UNC at the very end of the year was a prime example of that. I truly don't think anyone else on the roster could have made that catch. It was a one-of-one play, and Noah Rogers came down with it. And we're really looking for that to break out. He is a breakout candidate for NC State here in 2025. Let's talk some stats real fast. I do have a graphic for Noah. I'm going to have a graphic for all the players that we discuss here in the coming weeks. So if you were with us last year preseason, you might recognize this graphic. It's essentially the same format. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take every single player that we discuss, and I'm going to set a line for wide receivers. There'll be receiving yards. Running backs, it'll be rushing yards. Quarterback, CJ Bailey, it'll be pass yards. So last year, if I remember correctly, I think I set the line for Noah Rodgers at 500 yards. So it was 499 and a half. He finished last season with 478 yards. So that was pretty damn close. He had 35 catches for 478 and 1 touchdown. And in the same fashion that we discussed Justin Jolie, Noah Rodgers only had 2 games the entire year in which he caught 5 passes or more. Well, actually, he never caught more than 5 passes. Every single other game was 4 or less. He's too talented for that to be the case. Simply too talented. And I'm trusting Kurt Roper to change that here this season. But Kenton, this year, I have set the receiving yards line at 699 and a half, so virtually 700 yards for Noah Rodgers. Are you going over or are you going under?
You know, I come from, even though I'm from the west side of Detroit, I come from a Southern Baptist tradition in terms of religion. And there's a song that we have where they say, I'm trying to make 100, 99 and a half won't do. I'm going to go the over. 699 and a half won't do for Noah Rodgers. I think that he clears 700 fairly easily this year because I think that he steps up as wide receiver 1. I really do. In terms of who is wide receiver 1 on this team, I think that when game 1 kicks off from that day forward, I think it's going to be a battle between, again, I'm talking outside receivers here. I think it's going to be a battle between he and Grimes. I really do, because Wesley Grimes, we know what he can do. We talked about him being this explosive, take the top off the defense type of guy last year, and he showed his ability to do that. Noah Rodgers, we talked about who he is and how last year was his first chance and first exposure at, playing in real live game reps, meaningful game reps. I think he learns. I think he kind of calms down and has that steadying presence. He, with Jolie and Grimes, I think form a dynamic trio in terms of your first group out there. And then you add in a running back. I'm talking some Sosa Vandross here, young Hollywood Smothers. Absolutely. Play that Sosa. Absolutely torching defenses on the ground. I think that opens up some single high. And teams are saying, you know what? We need to bring more bodies in the box because Toujet and the boys are absolutely mauling. And then when you do single high, you've got to go one up on Noah. I think he goes over that 700.
It's going to be really interesting to discuss all the wide receivers because I think you have to take into account the Casey Concepcion effect. And he became a little bit of a vacuum in terms of targets last year. And the fact that Noah Rodgers only caught 35 balls, almost tallying 500 yards, one might think that he does actually clear this mark pretty easily. I mean, you got to figure he didn't have a single game last year where he went over 100 yards receiving. If he has like one game this year, and maybe it's early on against, I don't know, Campbell, for example, if he goes for like 120 yards, that's nearly like already 20% plus of this goal. So I think it's extremely doable. And Kenton basically already laid it out for you. If he does emerge as wide receiver 1, I think he might even blow past this mark. He might even hit 1,000 yards if we're keeping it a stack, pun intended here. So I think I'm also going to take the over. It's kind of interesting to try and figure out where these lines lay. But I think for right now, 699 and a half is, I guess, logical. And Noah Rodgers might say, 700. You think that's all I got? Maybe I'll put up 1K. We'll see. But I think we're both going over on here. I'm going to make sure to tweet all of these graphics out one by one. So Friday's show, obviously, I'll tweet this out tomorrow on Friday. Give us your thoughts on your expectations for Noah Rodgers, maybe some hesitations on Noah Rodgers, and if you think he will go either over or under 699 and a half receiving yards. Coming up next, we're getting into national perception of NC State football because for some reason, people still think Grayson McCall is the quarterback at NC State. More on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Our Friday show is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, so then why not make it just a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while you and all your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Or possibly you've already turned the page to college football season, just like I have. You might be dealing with all your college football futures bets, just like I am. Now's the perfect time to get all of those in. If you think NC State's going to go over 6.5 wins, maybe you have some thoughts on who might win the Heisman. Now is the time to go ahead and do your research and then get those bets in. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 today, and if it wins, you can get up to $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Of course, if that bet wins. Open up the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com in order to get started. Middle portion of our Friday show, I want to talk about something interesting because now it's been multiple occasions of something very specific happening in terms of NC State football national perception and maybe the fact that really no one is paying attention to the Wolfpack this coming fall. There was an article posted by David Hale of ESPN, who I really like David. He does a lot of great work. I don't know maybe if he fumbled the ball in here or somebody else fumbled the ball in the editing process, but he put out an article putting all 136 FBS teams into different tiers. So like there's national championship tiers, dark horse tiers, playoff surprise tiers, teams he thinks will regress to the mean in a negative way. The tier that he placed NC State in is regression to the mean in the good way, meaning that he thinks NC State will kind of get back to what they usually are, which is like a 7 to 8 win team. But the reason I wanted to bring this up here is not only did he group us with Auburn, Florida State, and Virginia Tech, who are 3 other teams that are looking to get back to their typical production. You might notice that that's not CJ Bailey. That's Grayson McCall. Why is there a picture of Grayson McCall? And then you zoom in a little bit further, and you can see the fine print underneath of this picture of Grayson McCall. And that reads, after transferring to NC State in 2024, could Grayson McCall lead the Wolfpack to a better season than last year's 6-7? They still think Grayson McCall is the quarterback. And the other instance I want to talk about, and I won't put them on blast, but I was recently on another podcast. I was a guest on another podcast, and they began asking me questions about the upcoming season for NC State. And they asked me about, can Grayson McCall rebound and have a better season this year than he did last year? And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So we've talked a little bit about the national brand perception of NC State and how much attention people are actually paying the Wolfpack in terms of not just the win total, but, you know, the players going in and out, the yearly production in terms of what they typically do. And arguably, this is a difficult question for us to answer because we're biased, just like all other Wolfpack fans are also biased. But how does the rest of the country actually view NC State? What's your thoughts, Kenton?
Well, I think that you kind of hinted at it earlier, but it needs to be said now. I don't think it's a hard question to answer. I think it's an answer that many people won't want to hear, but it's the truth. NC State is not perceived nationally. That's the problem. If NC State were perceived nationally, you wouldn't be saying can Grayson McCall lead the Wolfpack to a better season. Even if Grayson McCall did not retire from football for medical reasons, he would have been out of eligibility.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. That's not something that I would want to be. And here's the even more interesting thing. Of the teams in tier 9, regression to the mean in a good way, of those teams, you take out NC State, 2/3 of those teams are bringing in a new quarterback or a quarterback that did not start half of their games last year. Auburn and Florida State. Virginia Tech with Kyron Drones is the only one bringing a guy back that started half their season. And even with him, he was banged up for a lot of the year, even though he had some preseason ACC player dark horse hype behind him. And then you look at the amount of transfers those teams have as well. Whatever. I'm not really going to get into that. What I will say is NC State is not perceived nationally. We are not talked about nationally in terms of football. There is not a lot of love going on right now. This would be the equivalent of somebody saying, well, NC State basketball, rebounding from a tough year. How can Michael O'Connell help us out? How can he help you out in terms of getting better as a team? Objectively speaking, point guard, one of the most important positions in basketball, quarterback, one of the most important positions in football. Because Will Wade is here, everybody knows and is looking and is paying attention to basketball now. So that type of error would not occur. Football does not get that same love and attention because they have been painfully slightly above average. That's what this team has been. And I say painfully, not to say, we don't like the job that Doran has done. He's done a terrible job, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is when you talk about, do we get talked about in the national lexicon? You are painfully slightly above average. That's just what you are. Until you get into that 10-win, 11-win, 12-win territory, that is what you are. I'm sorry to tell you. There are multiple teams that have crossed into that threshold that are still seen that way. I believe Matt Campbell has won 9 or 10 games at Iowa State multiple times.
Yep.
Does anybody see them as an elite program?
Nope.
No, we haven't even been there. So I'm saying this not as a shot at Doran, not as a shot at our fan base, not as even a shot at the national media, although I will say it's a little bit of a shot at the national media because you need to do your damn job, okay? The amount that y'all are getting paid to do this, you need to do a little bit more due diligence than to say, oh, yeah, this 6-year quarterback is going to come back for, or 5th-year quarterback is going to come back for a 7th or 6th year. That's not how this works. So, objectively speaking, when you talk about NC State's perception in terms of football nationally, we aren't perceived, and that's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, I'm going to be very, very honest about something. And I know this is something that everyone has seen at some point, and it's usually coming from the Dirty Foot Club. But, online when you see, other fan bases saying, NC State, nobody thinks about NC State. Who is NC State? Why are you talking like this? You're just NC State. You know why they say that? Because there's a little bit of truth to it. People don't think about NC State. Like, outside of the Triangle and outside of the state of North Carolina, nobody really ever looks at NC State. Like, that is unfortunately extremely true. And I think something as small as this little snippet in this article, it kind of proves as such. People are so disinterested in learning virtually anything about NC State. They're like, well, who's the quarterback at NC? It's McCall, right? Yeah. Okay. No proofreading, no care to try and get that right, because NC State is forever just kind of there. And if you're familiar with the Pardon My Take podcast, every summer when sports talk is kind of dead, so to speak, they do these things called Mount Rushmores, and they're typically comical. They make it very funny. But one that stuck with me, and this is like years ago, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it stuck in my brain. The host, who is Big Cat, the topic was most mediocre things. And Big Cat, he went to Wisconsin. He's very nationally based in terms of sports coverage. One of his answers was NC State football. And for him to say that, who has no ties to North Carolina, no ties to NC State, no probably real interest in NC State virtually ever, other than maybe when he's betting on them, for him to think of the word average or mediocre and immediately associate that with NC State, unfortunately, that is kind of how we're known on a national scale. And so as weird and as lazy and as pretty pathetic as it is to miss something as small as like who's going to be the starting quarterback, especially when we just had ACC kickoff, 2 weeks ago, and our quarterback was there, and his name is CJ Bailey. That's all over the news, so I don't know how you miss something like that here. It's because NC State is virtually an afterthought. That's just really what it is. So when y'all hear Kent and I talk about brand perception and national awareness about NC State, it's really that important. Like, nobody thinks about us. And that ties to recruiting, that ties to financials in terms of budgeting, NIL, you name it. TV revenue, the rev share, same deal. A lot of things that have held NC State back over the course of the last decade plus. It can be attributed to national brand, national recognition, and then, of course, success on the field and or court. So it is interesting to kind of think outside of the triangle. And again, we're biased, so sometimes it's difficult for us to do that. But I want to hear y'all's thoughts. As objective as you can be, what do you feel like the national perception of NC State / NC State football specifically is? Let us know in the comments.
If I take you back to 2005, what was Clemson's national perception?
Clemsoning.
Okay. I mean, that's it. If I take you around to a lot of these schools, there are only but so many blue bloods. That's the reality. There are only so many teams. I talk about this phenomena all the time. There are only about 10 to maybe 15, if I'm being generous, teams where 8 wins a year will get you fired. All the rest, 8 wins a year will get a statue built in your honor. Yep. So what am I saying to say that? I'm not saying that NC State is a team that, regardless of what we do, we're irredeemably stuck in the phantom zone of irrelevance. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is something that I say all the time, which it's easy to say, hard to do. Just win, and you will get there. Think about where Arizona State is now. Think about how people are talking all of a sudden about Sam Levitt and his receiving corps. Think about what happened there. Remember the Antonio Pierce days, the Herm Edwards days over there? Remember what that was like? Now all of a sudden, they're national darlings. Why? Win. Sig up at Indiana. Fun fact, that new defensive coordinator that Clemson has, Tom Allen, guess what his last job was before his last job as a defensive coordinator? Head coach in Indiana. You see how Sig now has them, people looking at them saying, wait, what's going on up there in Bloomington? What's happening up there? Just win your football games. And all of a sudden, nobody's going to be saying, oh, well, what's going on with this CJ Bailey kid? Is he still going to be the quarterback? No, Will Rogers is our quarterback now. It's 2026 or 2027 rather. Will Rogers is our quarterback. CJ's going to the NFL. He's going to be a millionaire. Okay, so it's that type of deal where if you win your football games, you will have the opportunity to become a national darling. But it does not happen overnight, and it does not happen by accident. You don't ease your way or back your way into national relevance. You build national relevance.
And I'll give you one last example. And I don't think it's a great example because all three of these other schools have been the peak of college football. But just think about Auburn, Florida State, and Virginia Tech. If they had a quarterback that medically retired from the game of football last year, and then they had a freshman come in, finish that season, and it was widely understood that he was going to be the quarterback going into the next year, do you think that any of those three schools, that the country would not pay any attention to who the quarterback is?
Yeah.
I don't think they would. But NC State, we've not been in the same situation as those other three programs, so we get treated differently. That just kind of is what it is.
All three of those programs have also been to won a national championship since 2000.
Exactly.
Something to think about. Two of those programs won national championships in the past 15 years or so. I believe Auburn was 2010. So, you look at a situation where all of a sudden, when you do what you're supposed to do, when you win those football games, because let's be honest, if you take away that national championship from Auburn, what's their last memorable thing, right? The backfield. It's only because I'm a ball sicko. It's only because I'm a ball sicko that I remember the backfield with, and I'm talking about full season wide, but the kick six was a hell of a moment. But full season wide, the last thing you remember is Carnell Williams, Cadillac, Jason Campbell, and Ronnie Brown. That's it. That's the last thing you'll remember. So when you win your games, when you win national championships, when you win New Year's Six bowl games, all of a sudden the narrative around you changes because you've won the playoff. But you've got to go do the winning. Grayson and I sound like broken records talking about this because there is no easy way around it. Yeah. It's too high to get over and too low to get under. The only way is through.
And again, this is not us dumping on State saying we're not this and we'll never be this. This is just the reality of college sports. There are haves and there are have-nots. And until you do, you're a have-not. That's where NC State is right now. So I was going to say it's not a surprise to see NC State get treated like this. However, I think maybe there's some red-tinted glasses on. Does it not seem like it happens to NC State like specifically a lot? Like there's a lot of times where people call us UNC. Does this happen to other schools as often as it does to us? Maybe we don't have the answer to that. But if you win, if you're a consistent winner, you don't get forgotten about. And that's proof in the pudding right there. Coming up next, we're going to round out our Friday show with some popular over-unders for the ACC. Spoiler alert, NC State is one of them. We'll talk more on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple minutes of our Friday show. Wanted to spend a couple minutes on some popular over-unders for win totals in the ACC. Obviously, we know NC State's is set at 6.5. We've talked a little bit about that. We'll also do our full season schedule prediction as we do every preseason. That'll be probably the week before kickoff, if not a little bit after that. So stay tuned for that as well. But I'm starting to see a little bit of buzz, which is ironic because we just talked about NC State never getting any buzz. People are looking at the win total for NC State, and they're interested. They think 6.5 might be something that NC State can exceed this year. And I think some of that is attributed to the Doran reputation that when there's no expectations, I think NC State might be due for 8 wins this year. Does that seem right to you? Yeah, usually is. That's kind of what the buzz is right now. But some of the other populars, according to PFF, are as follows. On the screen here, you see Clemson, their over-under is 9.5. Duke is 6.5. Louisville is 8.5. And NC State is 6.5. Again, this comes from Max Chadwick of PFF. But Kenton, give me your thoughts on the 4 of these being the most popular overs in the ACC.
Well, I've talked ad nauseum about how I can see NC State winning less than 5 or more than 8. So obviously 8 is higher than 6.5. That's definitely a thing that can happen there. Louisville, you know about the explosive run game. Duke has not won less than 8 games of the season in almost 4 years. Like, that's just the reality of who Duke is now. I mean, we got to put a little bit of respect in them. And Clemson, they can lose both their first and last game of the season and still clear 10. And it's not even like a difficult path where it's like, oh my God, there's no way that Clemson gets to this. But sticking to NC State here, I look at that 6.5 and I see people taking over. And like you said, Doran is building in darkness. You know, he's the bane of the ACC. Like, when other teams say that they're going to shut out the media and do it while nobody's paying attention, he looks at them and says, oh, you think the darkness is your ally? I was born with no national media attention. And that's really what Doran is and where he thrives and does his best. Speaking of national media attention, Doran, if you could give us that box you gave Gruden, you know, we'll put out episodes more. That's neither here nor there. The reality is this. You look at NC State and where they are, this is a side effect of Doran being relentlessly consistent. And again, this is why when we tell y'all Doran raising the floor is not a bad thing, that's the truth. We're not saying this from a standpoint of, oh, you know, just take your 7, shut up and be happy. We're not saying that. What we are saying is the nation, the bettors, the smart money is recognizing, hey, this is how things typically go at NC State. And so with that in mind, I'm not surprised seeing that 6.5 with an offense that is going to be star-studded by the end of this year. I believe that at least half of the starting offense will be on some type of ACC all-conference team. I believe at least half of the offense will be there. And so you look at the end, Noonkester as well. So you look at a field flipper in terms of special teams, making teams drive really long field. You're looking at a really good offense that when the defense is opportunistic or does get a stop that gives them a short field, they can take advantage. 6.5 is not, 7 wins is not out of this world, especially because with this schedule, you don't even need a couple lucky breaks to get to 7. You can get to 7 without those lucky breaks. Lord forbid you throw in a couple breaks here and there, a couple things go your way, a couple balls roll your way. You could easily see this team clearing 7.
And I think it is something that many of us should start looking into. I think there's a buzz starting to grow about that 6.5 line for NC State. Like I said, we're going to give our full season predictions here in a little over a week's time. So we'll save that for then. But for these other 3 schools on here, Kenton, just real quickly, let's go through and see if we agree with the over. So we'll start with Clemson. I'll just buzz right through the schedule. We're going to say win or loss. So week 1, LSU, win or loss.
Win.
I agree. Troy.
Win.
At Georgia Tech.
Win.
Agree. Syracuse at home.
Win.
At the Dirty Foot Club.
Win.
At Boston College.
Win.
SMU at home.
That one's going to be closer than most people think, but I think it's still a win.
Duke at home.
Now, that is their trap game, but I still see them winning it in the tight one. I think K. Klubnik pulls off some heroics, and I also think this is a Gideon coming out party against Duke. I don't know why, but I got a strange feeling that one's going to be the game. Win.
Still no disagreement for me. We're at 8-0 so far. Florida State at home.
Win.
At Louisville.
If they did not have revenge on their mind, this would be the game where I say they trip up. But Louisville beat them last year in Death Valley. They're going to be motivated. Win.
Agree. And then you have Furman.
Win.
Free space. Yep. And then last at South Carolina, the last game of the regular season.
Looking for revenge here. All fall 25. They go and get their revenge in the Palmetto Bowl. They get a win.
Okay, so you have them at 12-0. I don't necessarily disagree. I think that Louisville game's interesting, but the revenge piece is very important. I've gone back and forth a little bit about the season opener against LSU, but I think Clemson's ready for him. To be completely honest, I think Clemson's going to win that game. So the only other game is South Carolina. I think South Carolina is potentially a surprise team in the SEC this year. I've done a little sprinkling on Lenora Sellers for Heisman. We'll see how that goes. But I think you're looking at probably 11-1 is the floor for Clemson. Ceiling feels like 12-0. So I agree with the over on here. Now let's flip over to Duke. Week 1, they have Elon.
Win.
Illinois at home.
Ooh, I think Illinois is better. I think Illinois is better than people give them credit for. And Altmaier does not turn the ball over, but I don't think they have the weapons offensively to outpace Duke. And I don't think Duke's offense is going to be world beaters either, but I see that as a win for Duke. It's a 50-50. It's a push for me, but I'll give it to Duke.
That one feels like a little bit of a rock fight, in my opinion. I'm actually going to go with Illinois, so I'll go with loss.
Sure.
At Tulane, week 3.
I think that one's a win as well.
NC State.
Here's the thing. I actually think NC State trips them up here. I really do. I really think NC State trips them up. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to go ahead and give Duke a win here.
I'm going to be very lame, but I haven't made up my mind yet, so skip me on that one. Next game is at Syracuse.
Now, here's where I think their first loss comes in. I think that's a trap game because that's going to be a Syracuse team that they think is down and dejected because they faced some early bumps in bruises. But I think that Syracuse team is going to find a way to pull that one out.
I get the same feeling. I think Syracuse will catch them there. Next game's on the road at Cal.
Win.
Georgia Tech at home.
Loss. I think Georgia Tech, with all due respect to everything that Duke brings, I think their physicality is their biggest aspect. But as the old saying goes, what happens when the intimidator cannot intimidate? He becomes intimidated. You're looking at an extremely physical Georgia Tech team. I think they get a win.
Agree. On the road at Clemson. We already said that's a loss. So that's a loss. On the road at UConn.
One loss has turned into 2, but 2 would not turn into 3. They get a win against UConn.
Okay. Virginia at home.
Win.
Agree. I have a weird feeling about Virginia. I think they're going to be slightly better than a lot of people think, but I think Duke will finish.
I'm not a Chandler Morris believer. I can't do it.
I don't know, man.
I'm
sling the rock.
I'm against year 1 transfer quarterbacks. I've got a little PTSD. I've got a little PTSD. I'm sorry.
That is perhaps your firmest take, so I got to give you credit where credit is due on that one. Game 11 is on the road in Chapel Hill for Duke.
I think we get a win there.
I agree. And the last game of the season is Wake Forest at home.
Win.
Okay, so I think you had them at 3 losses, maybe 4 losses. That would be the over. That you're looking at 8-4, potentially 9-3. I think I have them at. Well, I guess I got to make my mind up on NC State, don't I? I think Duke goes over. I think whether it's 7 wins or 8 wins, I do think Duke goes over. Lastly, real quick, we'll go through Louisville's schedule. Week 1, you have East Kentucky.
Win.
Or Eastern Kentucky, excuse me. That's still a win. JMU, week 2.
Win.
Bowling Green, week 3.
Win.
On the road at Pitt.
They got some revenge on their mind. But I think the problem is fighters don't make fights. Styles make fights. They run the ball extremely well, but Pitt has one of the best linebacking crews. If Narduzzi don't do nothing else, he's going to coach you up on how to stop that run. And I think Holstein is the better quarterback. I think Pitt squeaks one out. I think Pitt squeaks a close one out here.
That should be a good game, but I'm going to take Louisville there. Week 5 against UVA.
I think a win.
Okay. On the road at Miami.
Loss.
That feels like a toss-up. I think they can win. We'll see about
I agree.
Beck at that point of the season.
I agree. I think it's a little more than the toss-up in Miami's favor, only because in the trenches on both sides, they are so good. That's the only thing that scares me for Louisville in that one.
I'm going to go with loss as well. And I think at that point, that's their first for me. So you're looking at a 5-0 start for Louisville, and their over-under is 8.5. That's a great start. But I'm going to go loss at Miami. Next week is Boston College at home.
Win.
Agree. On the road at Virginia Tech.
I think that's the one that trips them up. I think that's the one that we look back at like, how did they lose that game? What happened? I think something wonky happens because Blacksburg is known. They got some black magic going on in Blacksburg. And I think that's the one black magic game of the year for Blacksburg where you're like, wait, what happened? How did Louisville not win that one?
That game already feels drunk to me. I think it's going to be absolute chaos. So I don't know. I could see Virginia Tech winning. You know what? Give it to them. I think the Hokies take that one. Next one is Cal at home.
Win. The algorithm is going to struggle this year.
And then we're back at that Clemson game. November the 14th, Clemson at Louisville.
Oh, no. Clemson is looking for revenge. They're walking in this trap. They're taking over the trap. Give me a loss here.
All right. I try to get you to change your mind, even though I'm not doing it either. I think Clemson wins that one. On the road at SMU.
I think this is game of the year potential. I think this is going to be a very exciting, very high-scoring game.
Yep.
I think the better quarterback wins, and that quarterback's Kevin Jennings. I think they pull out a close one, but I think they get it done.
That one smells like some points to me. I think it's going to be first one to like 45, maybe even 50. It's going to be a very high-scoring affair. I'm going to take Louisville. I really think they can go on the road and get it done. SMU at times, it kind of hinges on how well Kevin Jennings can play. We saw against Penn State, the CFP, he threw 3 picks. I mean, that's going to be the ball game. So if Kevin Jennings shows up, SMU can win, but I don't know. I have a feeling about Louisville in that one. Last week of the season for Louisville is Kentucky at home.
I think Kentucky's going to be a dumpster fire this year. I think Louisville gets it done. I think Louisville gets it done in this one.
All right. So if I'm not mistaken, I think we're both looking at 9-3 there for Louisville, possibly even better than that. Could be 10-2. So all of these make sense to us. I mean, shout out to Max Chadwick. We kind of did some homework right in front of everyone else here, and we agree on all of the other 3 schools in terms of overs. Again, you'll hear our official answer for NC State in a little over a week's time when we go through our schedule prediction. That will do it for us here on Friday. And just to reiterate, we will have an episode both Saturday and Sunday, playing a little bit of catch up for y'all because we owe you some episodes. Don't think we forgot, but that'll do it for us here on Friday. Be sure to hit that like button, drop your comments in the comment box, mash that subscribe button if you have not already. We'll catch you right back on Saturday for more. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.